न रूपमस्येह तथोपलभ्यते नान्तो न चादिर्न च सम्प्रतिष्ठा अश्वत्थमेनं सुविरूढमूलम् असङ्गशस्त्रेण दृढेन छित्त्वा ततः पदं तत्परिमार्गितव्यम् यस्मिन् गता न निवर्तन्ति भूयः तमेव चाद्यं पुरुषं प्रपद्ये यतः प्रवृत्तिः प्रसृता पुराणी. Its form is not here perceived as such, neither its end nor its foundation or resting place, having cut asunder this firm-rooted peepal tree with the strong axe of non-attachment. Then that goal should be sought for, where having gone none returns again. I seek refuge in that primeval Purusha, the streamed forth the ancient activity or the ancient energy. So, there is that essential self behind the scene of this tree, which is actually the root. So, I have to elevate myself to subtler heights of my imagination and thinking, and I have to steady myself in that subtle, pure guna, which is sattva. I have to steady my mind in that, from where I can see and perceive and think and imagine and feel nothing other than the root, which is the true self. That was the content of the 10th and the 11th chapters. So, and then I can see this tree spread out endlessly. And the form is not even perceivable. Why? Because of it expands. And then its expanse is such that we don't even know which is the main trunk and which are the secondary and tertiary roots, or whether they are branches, or in which direction it is going, and whether it has that foundation or not, we are unable to perceive at all. So how do I manage? How do I deal with this kind of a tree? How do I handle this confusion which is all around me? How do I detach myself? Asanga shastrena dridhena chitva. Having cut asunder this massive tree, then tatah tat padam parimargitavyam. Thereafter only I can actually pursue the path of spirituality, that path. So how do I cut it asunder? By way of detachment. But how do I detach myself? So what was the whole story about the Bhagavad Gita was this only. We are extremely attached. Each individual is attached. To what? Am I attached to the people, the family, the objects, the world? Where is the attachment? Oh, this I is attached to its own inherent gunas. And according to that, this I keeps nourishing the creation, the world of its own, world of objects and the feelings and emotions and the world of thoughts. So where is the attachment? Attachment is very much in me. So I have to detach myself, not from the world, but from my own tendencies. How do I separate I from the gunas? That is the whole play. This veil of Maya, which is Trigunatmika, which is formed out of the three gunas, creates the veil on my true self that leads me to non-apprehension of my true self. And then the projecting power of the same Maya leads me to misapprehension, that all this I see is reality. So, it is that ignorance, avidya, which is misleading me. So, vidya alone can remove avidya. Ignorance can be removed by knowledge alone. If I do not pursue knowledge, ignorance cannot be removed. So, is it attachment or is it ignorance? It is ignorance. Had I known my true self, then there wouldn't have been this veil of Maya for me to get attached to it. If I know that it is not real, how can I get attached to it? Because I myself am inflicting my ignorance on the objects and then possessing them as though they are real. So this whole, you can say, drama or play is due to my own ignorance about my own self. So, can I detach myself from this play of ignorance without, in fact, connecting myself with the divine? Not really. Because for the mind to think about nothing is not possible. And the mind cannot stay without thinking. This I, the intellect, cannot stay without, what is that? Imagination and ideas belong to my intellect, and feelings and emotions belong to my mind, the flow of thoughts. So, neither can stay in nothingness. They both need to hang on to something. And as soon as it is something related to this imagination of world, then it cannot come out of it. So therefore we need that kind of knowledge which can give a platform for the mind and intellect both to hang on to the divine only. Then there is a scope of detachment. So connecting with the divine, therefore, is the foremost teaching, in fact, of every religion, because any saint from any religion has understood the divine self, has realized the divine self, and has understood the worthlessness of getting attached to the undivine expanse of false creation. So there can be different ways of connecting oneself, but ultimately one will have to connect to the higher. Tatah tat padam parimargitavyam yasmin gata na nivartanti bhuyah. Having gone where there is no return. Where having gone, none returns again. That is, you don't return to ignorant ways. Once you have known the Supreme, there is no way that you can fall back into ignorant ways. So, once to know it is so important that once for all I can get out of this Maya. For any such pursuit, and that too for the highest pursuit, we need to be humble, because this I is creating attachment. So, to drop this I will not be possible for this I. So, therefore, this I has to surrender to the divine. Therefore, Bhagavan himself says, Tam eva chadyam purusham prapadye. I seek refuge in that primal Purusha. Yatah pravritti prasrita purani, from which streamed forth the ancient activity. The story began from that Parama Purusha, and I seek refuge unto that Parama Purusha. That supreme, primeval, Adi Purusha, Parama Purusha. The pure self, the eternal self, from where all this has begun. This has streamed out, it has expanded because of leading myself to ignorance. So Bhagavan himself promotes this idea of surrender, because it is a teaching to all the seekers that no matter how much we read on our own or how much we practice on our own, but ultimately, if I do not put my faith in the divine and surrender, I will never be able to drop this I, because I meditate, I understand, I read, I worship, this I remains. I meditated well, I went to that height. The I is only going to that height, no. So what do I do with this I? So surrender. Now with this thought, remember that we are supposed to chant this before meals. So with this thought, when I eat, so I am in fact putting the divine before me. So when the divine is before me, I am chanting this. So this food becomes prasad. And prasad brings peace, happiness. That is the happiness of pure existence, not dependent on anything. So now the food becomes secondary, and the nourishment that the food is going to give me is very important for me. The kind of food that I am going to partake in the form of prasad of the divine is going to nourish my thought process and is going to nourish my physical self as well as my intellectual imagination. So that which I am going to offer has to be pure, because it is going to be offered to the Supreme Self. How am I going to offer? Is to be known. So we will see in this chapter itself how nicely Bhagavan is going to explain as to how this nourishment is accepted or taken by the primeval Purusha. whose refuge I am trying to ask for, seek for. There are some qualities which are important for self-elevation. If I can inculcate these qualities, then I'll be able to detach myself. If I can detach myself to some extent, definitely it will be because of my uniting or identifying or connecting with the divine in me. So, here are some suggestions given by the Lord.